Hey, good morning, everybody. Robert Phoenix here. I'm back once again. It is 8:34 Central Standard Time, broadcasting to you live from hopefully fluoride-free Fredericksburg. We got our election coming up wow, not too long, 2 weeks. So early voting has started here. If for some reason or chance you actually live in Fredericksburg and watch my broadcast, which I'm not sure many people do, I would highly suggest you go out and do some early voting because it's happening right now, and get on board the anti-fluoride train. The dentists have been overly aggressive, taking out full page ads, and the local newspaper here took a side, and the local newspaper published a full page editorial about fluoride and why we should have fluoride in our water. Yeah, I had a really hard time with that. But I also am slightly cynical enough to understand that this is how these things work in small towns, or even with the power of the press. So I've been advised by certain people who are around the newspaper that the driving force of the newspaper ideologically happens to be the publisher's significant other. And I'll leave that alone. But needless to say, I was not surprised when it happened. Oh, look who's here. You missed him. I was getting all kinds of letters and emails wanting to know where this guy was, because of course he's got his own internet following. He might even be more popular than myself. So when he comes on board, you know what we have to do, don't you? Huh, you know it. You know it. You know exactly where this is going. It is all about Mr. Jasper, the astrological cat. I just have to find this video. Get back in the swing of things here. Let me just find it. 1 second here. Let's see. There it is. There it is, right here. This is it, right there, right? Here we go. Oh, this is the one. And again, a big shout out to Gabrielle and Caroline for the Jasper song. And I know how much everybody loves it because it sticks in their brain for most of the day. So let's see if we can give a little nod to Jasper here. Here we go. And a 1, and a 2, and a 3.
Jasper, the astrological cat. Look up your chart, show you right where you're at. It's Jasper, the astrological cat.
The only cat on the internet with his own astrological song. Is that in the Guinness Book of Records? Could Jasper be in the Guinness Book of Records? Look at him. Look at him. He's so happy to see me. So I've now returned to home base. Yes. So let me just check in with Chatlandia as we get the theme song out of the way today. Let's see where you guys are at this morning. Got a lot to catch up on. Let's see, what do we have? The Jasper tune, Mercola says what may be outlawed soon. Check out. Yes, we've been talking about that. Posted that over on the Facebook page, right? And there's Lynn. Hi, Lynn. There's Lynn Ringer. Let's see. What else do we have here? Luann. Hi, Luann. Jasper is a handsome cat. He's got a little tooth problem, though. Jasper's lost a few teeth. That's the one flaw in Jasper's programming. There's Uncle Glenn, there's Judy, there's Anna. Hi, Anna. There's Maury, Lori. Hi, Lori. And let's see, who else? What else we got going on there? And then there's Isla. Hi, Isla. Nice to see you. So yeah, just to give you an update on the side of the dentists and the paper. You know, there's this weird kind of liberal, how do I say this? There's this weird kind of liberal ideology that's connected to fluoride. Now remember, you have to understand, water is a medium, okay? It's a medium. It's not just the thing that we drink, although it's an important thing that we drink. It's probably the most important thing on the planet. Well, I guess all the five elements are equally important, but water is a really, really big deal, super big deal. And it's a medium, right? So water, of all the elements, tends to be the most emotionally charged. Air, of course, is intellectually charged or mentally charged, but water is emotionally charged. So when you talk about something like fluoride, just because it's in the water, it's an emotionally charged issue. Secondly, water is Piscean. Pisces rules all the water, rules oceans and lakes and rivers and streams and ponds and swamps. You know, there are variations. Like I think of a swamp as being very scorpionic in some ways, but it rules all the water. So Pisces, as we know, as a sign, has this spiritual quality associated with it. And sometimes the spiritual quality can be very pure and undiluted, like incredibly pure water that is, you know, probably somewhere in some remote cave, someplace, unaffected by things like chemtrails and microplastics. But also Pisces represents sort of the worst of our water with, in this case, I really believe is the amount of drugs that are now seeping into our water. And a place like Kerrville, which I've talked about before, which is just south of here, their water is horrific. They've got huge amounts of medicated drugs, right? The meds that people take, and trust me, people are taking lots of meds in Kerrville because it's the recovery capital of Texas and one of the top 5 recovery capitals in the US. I think Dr. Phil has a recovery joint in Kerrville, if I'm not mistaken. So that gives you some idea as to what's going on in Kerrville. And not only that, but there's a huge drug issue that is not about taking meds. That's also connected to Kerrville and other parts of. Now, Jasper, I love you. You're great, but right now you're really blocking my flow. I'm getting into the Piscean flow, and Jasper is blocking the flow. Anyway, so there's lots of legal and illegal drugs and the remnants of them, which are very hard to remove from water. Not just in Kerrville, but in a lot of our water supplies. And that's the other side of the Piscean trip, right? Because Pisces rules drugs. And so now we're seeing this literally infiltration of all these random drugs that are showing up in our water supply, which is, you know, kind of a crisis that nobody's really talking about. And we wonder why people are nuts, or we wonder why people get unhinged. And it's due to the fact that they're probably drinking fluoridated water laced with, you know, about, you know, 150 different chemical compounds at a micro level, okay? So bringing it back to the spiritual thing, this is what the dentists always revert to. The dentists always revert to the fact that they're doing good work, because theoretically this shit that's masquerading as fluoride called hydrofluorosilicic acid, it is an industrial waste byproduct of chemical fertilizers. So they have these these industrial grade fertilizers, and then they have the byproduct of that, the waste, and it's hydrofluorosilicic acid. Now, what are they going to do with this hydrofluorosilicic acid? If they dump in the water supply, we would have an immediate crisis, an absolute immediate crisis on a large ecological scale. It would be an environmental crisis. If it got into the water, if it got into the air, it would be bad news, really bad news. So they got to figure out how to get rid of this shit. So what do? They stick it in our water and they call it fluoride. It is not fluoride. It is not sodium fluoride. I'm not even a fan of sodium fluoride. And in this town, we've got fluoride, which is 0.4 parts per million, naturally occurring. Gee, don't you think that's enough? No, we've got to raise that up to 0.3 parts per million more to get it to 0.7, which is the EPA kind of maximum, or I believe minimum for effective fluoridation, theoretically, right? So I'm not sure it's the EPA. I think it's probably the ADA. I think it's their standard. Anyway, so we've got this really toxic chemical that's being leached into our water supply, and not just here in Fredericksburg, but in all these counties and cities across the United States. You have to check it out. You have to fact find for yourself. And we got the toxicology report from the company that actually sells the shit to us, and it's high in arsenic and it's high in lead. And the EPA says there is no safe standard for arsenic and lead, none. And so the dentists, when when you hit them with this, they push back on it, and they've got some sort of bullshit excuse or rationalization. Well, it is naturally occurring anyway, so it wasn't really bad. No, it's no safe level. You're adding to it. You're adding to it. So where they go with this is that the poor wretched souls who are experiencing caries and cavities and tooth decay, that if we didn't fluoridate the water, those poor people would not be able to have minimal dental care. And by doing that, what we're doing is we're having a spiritual experience. We're having a spiritual experience. We're feeling good about the work that we're doing. You know, with all the mercury that we're sticking up into people's mouths, we have a good feeling, a good vibe about, you know, what we're doing for the rest of the folks of the water. To me, it's a spiritual shell game. That's what it is. Now, because they are the high priests of science and they firmly believe that this is the right thing to do, many of them won't even consider the fact that they're actually doing more harm than good. One of the dirty little secrets of fluoride is it makes the enamel on the tooth harder. Doesn't make it stronger. It just makes the enamel on the tooth harder, which means, guess what? Your teeth are going to chip more and crack more. And guess who's going to take care of that? Not Jasper, it's the dentist. Jasper, why don't you go over to your spot, the catbird seat, as they say. Let's go on over there. Go do that. But he's really very active today, first day back. Anyway, so this is the spiritual impulse around fluoride, and it is coming mostly from the left, because the left, of course, want to serve the masses who are not getting the same health care, the same opportunities, and the same goodies that, you know, we as the privileged caste of Western civilization have been given most of our lives. So it's a feel-good moment. They can wake up in the morning and they can drink that fluoridated water and know that somebody somewhere from some other country who was not from here, generally speaking, or somebody who's really poor is benefiting from their fluoride. Now, what's really interesting is that this argument has been used for a while, and the so-called Black community, so-called Latino community are pushing back. They're like, we're being targeted. We're being targeted because of our economic status. Number one, take us out of that, because we don't want to be associated with that economic status or the stigma that goes along with it. And number two, there are people in those communities, they've woken up and they realize that maybe they're being targeted. That the fluoride is there to continue not just burn out our pineal glands, but their pineal glands. Well, ours meaning the upper middle class, right? So, and by the way, the challenges we deal with in this country are they're economic and class related. They are not necessarily race related. The race issues were created by the communists. Racism was something that was used by Lenin and by the Bolsheviks and the Bolshevists, and it was brought to this country. And you go back and you look at the whole civil rights movement, which was basically funded by the Bolsheviks and the communists. I'm not saying that civil rights isn't important. It is. We all have to live by the creed of the Constitution, right? We have constitutional rights. So, and at the same time, it was a social movement that was founded and funded by the communists. If you look at, and I've talked about this before, if you look at Martin Luther King, he was educated at what's called the Outlander School, and that was in Tennessee, and it was basically a a communist finishing school where MLK was steeped in Marxist doctrine. That school is now since closed, but it was a very, very important kind of center in the South that pumped up the neo-Marxists for the 20th century, the mid-20th century, late 20th century. Rosa Parks went to school there as well. Rosa Parks was not somebody who had this revelation one day while she was sipping on her coffee down at the Five and Dime. Rosa Parks was a born, and well, she's not born, but she was bred communist. And when she sat in the first part of that bus, they knew what they were doing. It was a staged operation. And I'm not saying that she can't sit in the darn bus in first class. So it's one of those things where, you know what, good. Glad it happened. And guess who engineered it? Okay. So that engineering has continued. That said, there's a whole group of people now that are saying, we don't want the fluoride. Thank you very much. Thank you for lacing our water supply with your fucking white privilege. We're over that. Okay. You know, let us go out and find the toothpaste, or let us determine the nature of our own teeth. And in a lot of ways, they're right, because it smacks of colonialism. Putting fluoride in the water smacks of colonialism. Like there's a group that believes that they know better than another group, and they're going to force their views and they're going to force their mandate onto these other groups, particularly targeting groups that are theoretically less than capable or able of taking care of their own teeth, which is bullshit. And if I was a so-called minority, I would be insulted. I would say, get your fucking fluoride out of our water. And even here in this town in Fredericksburg, there's not a lot of poor people. I'm sorry. I've done the numbers. It is not a poor, if you want to live here, you got to make money. Okay. You need to make money. That's not to say that we don't have a diverse population. We do. We do have a diverse population. It's mostly diverse in the sense that it is so-called Latino and so-called white, German for the most part. That's it. But that's been the melting pot of Texas, you know, since the state, you know, basically became a state. It was Germans and the Latino culture and also the Native Americans for the most part, although they're few and far between now. Anyway, so that's what we're dealing with on the fluoride side. And they're pious and pompous, and they think that, oh my God, we need to do this. It's just the right thing to do. Where else have you heard that? Where else have you heard? Well, there are people here that don't want that to happen. Now, look, I don't drink the water. I shower with the water, but I have a filter. I drink other water. So, you know, ultimately, will their decision impact me if we lose? Not really. But it'll impact people that just drink the water. That's what it'll impact them, and it'll impact them in ways that I believe are negative. And the most negative is that we are not consenting to this. Well, now we have a vote, and I guess people can't consent to it. This is how the process works. So there, and if the initiative loses, then people have spoken. They've spoken. Now, there is this threat that fluoride is going to be banned from all water systems. And the reason why is because there are lawsuits that are beginning to pile up. And they're beginning to look at these lawsuits. And the EPA is looking around going, maybe we should get out of the fluoride business. Because if we wind up having to do a lawsuit, then it could be significantly painful, both on municipalities, in states, and the government. So, God, where are we at? The next Monday is going to be, so we're in the voting zone right now. Wish I could go to a city council meeting. I'm going to write a letter to the editor. Maybe it's too late for today. Try to get in. Let me look at my calendar. I'm sorry. I'm obsessing now with the fluoride thing. Give me 1 minute. Figuring this out in real time. Okay, let's see. So the vote is going to be on this Thursday. So I think I can get, hold on, where are we? November. The vote is going to be on Tuesday. And where are we now? We're here. Yeah, we're in it now. We're definitely, okay, so I think I can get one more letter to the editor in. And I'm going to write about the suit with Monsanto. Well, not Monsanto, but the suits that are piling up and the fact that fluoride may be banned. In which case, the city will look very, very foolish. Very, very foolish. Extremely foolish. Maybe they'll, you know, what will the dentists do at that point when fluoride from the water is banned? My God. Anyway, all right, let's get back into some of the news from yesterday. So you know that I was talking about yesterday with the Younger case down in or up in a suburb of Dallas. The Younger Georgioulis, I think their name is, where the boy James is going to be transitioned from James to Luna. Now, apparently, what I've heard is that Ann Georgioulis is operating a clinic where she wants to be able to be more involved in the transitioning of kids. So like what's going on with her son is part of her business model. That's what I've heard, that she's going to get more and more involved. And you know why? Because there's money there. There's a lot of money that's being pumped into the transgender industry, and it is an industry and an economy. I showed you that website yesterday, the WPath, right? The WPath website, where you can become a licensed WPath certified counselor, care counselor. So there's a career path now. And if you're floundering around your job and you say, hey, I can take this, next thing you know, you're in a clinic somewhere and you're probably making about $5,500 a month, sitting down and going through the WPath guidelines and stepping young people through their gender transition. So it's not just from that perspective, but there's also all the drugs involved. And so think about this now. You get a kid who's 5, 6 years old who wants to please one of their parents. And now you've got that kid on these precursors for chemical castration. And then you get them into estrogen versus testosterone. You start with the blockers. How much does that stuff cost every month? How much does it cost? And who pays for that cost ultimately? And over that you're getting that child for the lifespan of that child to take whatever it takes in order to anchor this phony identity. That's what's happening. That's what's happening. Now, let's get to the spiritual level of this. I do believe that there are parts of us, like maybe at a soul level, that are more feminine and more masculine. I think that there are parts of us that have this. And you can be a man with a feminine spirit, or your soul might have a feminine orientation, and you could be born into a male body. Guess what? You get to learn about it. And the same thing could be said for women. You could be a woman who has a masculine orientation. You're born into a female body. Guess what? You get to learn about it. You get to learn about whatever comes along with it. And this is why we have bodies. But science says, oh, no. You don't have to learn about those things. You don't have to grapple with the issues of the dynamics around sex and politics and polarity. No, we can make that change for you. We can make your life a lot easier. And just get on the bus and keep giving us your money for the rest of your life. That's what happens. So instead of actually having to deal with the fact, hey, you know, like how many, and I know there are women out here in my chat room who played baseball and soccer and football, and you know, we're classic tomboys. Classic tomboys. And they grew up, and guess what they did? You know, they grew into their body, and they continue their relationship with sports. You know, it's an archetype in some ways. And then they got married and they had kids, but they stayed on the female track. What happens if science gets in and says, "Oh, you'd like to play baseball and soccer?" Well, first of all, if you're a girl, you'd be lying. That's in our culture today. But secondly, it's like, well, guess what? We have things that can take you even further. But if you're a young guy, and again, I'll go into my chat room, and like the men that showed up at the Harvest Moon event, and we had about a 60-40 split, which was great. Those were sensitive men. Those were caring, sensitive, kind, gentle men. You know, I gotta give a shout out to Bill Olmsted. What an evolved guy, you know, and he wound up taking care of some of the elder women, or not elder, but women in our group who were not physically able to do some activities, and Bill hung out with them. That's what he did. You know, this is what a kind, conscious, caring man does. He's sensitive. But do we want to put a skirt on Bill Olmsted? Do we want to get him on testosterone blockers? No, absolutely not. You know, we are in the process of, this is really where I think we could have a much higher discussion around this. Because we went through a phase where it wasn't cool to be a man on some level. Like you go back into the late 60s, early 70s when Chiron went into Aries and the women's liberation movement started. It wasn't cool to be a man. You had to be sensitive. You had to talk about things. You had to ask permission, all these things, right? And in some ways, those things are important. Maybe not in the way that they were commodified, but they're important. And a lot of men lost their way. On the flip side, women were taught to be aggressive. They were taught that their independence, their career opportunities were way more important than raising a family, because Betty Friedan and the rest of the feminists basically said that if you decide to be a housewife and have children and raise a family, you're sick, you're twisted, you're perverted, and you're weak. And there was a social stigma that arose around this. And so we have this split of this identity atom. It takes place right around 1966, 67, 68 when Chiron goes into Aries. And second wave feminism begins to really kick into gear. So since then, we're going through all these machinations and all these permutations. And we're getting to this point now where quite possibly there can be a rebalancing of the masculine and the feminine. That the women at my event, or the event that I organized, those were some strong women. They were strong women, but their strength was not sacrificed. Their femininity was not sacrificed in order to promote their strength. Let's be clear about that. And the men, the same deal. The men, they were very sensitive and caring men, but their masculinity wasn't sacrificed in order to have that become part of who they are. And so what we're looking at here is this rejoining, this synthesis that is coming back together after all these years of swallowing the feminist fucking bullshit lie. I'm sorry. And at the same time, men who were inculcated into a certain version of the patriarchy have re-engineered themselves. They said, well, these are the things that matter about being a man. And some of the things that were toxic about being a man, I don't have to deal with those. I don't want to deal with those. But it's not at the expense of being able to be a man. And it's a really interesting time that we're living in. And as we're coming back together with this synthesis, now what are we dealing with? We're dealing with the outer version of this, with the transgender push, the transgender agenda. And it's like, no, we're not going to honor this natural organic rejoining of the sexes, where we're coming back together in a very unique way in a very whole way. No, we're going to discount that. And the only way that this can be done is if we hijack your biology and keep you on drugs for the rest of your life. And the younger, the better. The younger, the better. It's not lost on my radar that the name of the boys on the father's side are younger. Is that interesting? Younger. Younger and younger. This is happening. Greg Abbott has stepped in. The governor, the paraplegic governor of the state of Texas, has stepped in, and he's going to turn Ken Paxton loose. Ken Paxton is the attorney general, and the attorney general is in charge of the child side of things here in the state of Texas. And I know this because I make a check out to Ken Paxton every month. Ken Paxton, he's somebody that's been dealing with corruption charges ever since he's been in office, and nothing's ever happened. I don't know. I don't know what Greg Abbott can do. I don't know what Ken Paxton can do, but this ruling got on Greg Abbott's radar. So he's the governor. He's now going to be looking into this case. Now, the one thing that Ken Paxton does oversee is he does oversee CPS. That is his department and his division. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with CPS. Now, unfortunately, my take is that the Freemasonic influence in the Texas government and across all states, by the way, and across the entire globe, is pretty prevalent. So, and I was having a conversation with Joan this morning, and was talking about that, and it was really interesting because if you look at the Freemasonic model inside the family, what does it do? It tears the family apart. The men spend more and more time at meetings, more and more time away from the family. And then if you read, there's a whole series of accounts of wives who have been married to Freemasons, and they leave them, and their stories are horrible. They find matchbooks with the names of escorts, and because basically that's what happens. These guys get away, they go away, they have these hot, I don't know, theoretically hot looking women, and they bring them in, they pay them, and then they have these wild weekends, and then it goes into things like swinging. And I think that there are some partners and some wives inside of that community that say, okay, I'm in. This is your world, and this is what you do. I'm in. Let's go. Let's go. What do we need to do? Well, we need to sleep with this couple. Okay, well, let's do it. And that happens. People make these decisions. They're business decisions, just like they're business decisions with people who turn their children out and give them up for some higher level of manipulation and molestation. It's a business decision. Read Kathy O'Brien's book. It's what her father did. He hoarded her out, and he did really, really well as a result of that. Would not be surprised Kathy O'Brien's father belonged to some society or some group. It happens. So that the model is kind of baked in to how it infiltrates and gets into the family and can atomize the family. If that's the model inside the family, that's the micro. What about the macro? See, this is what we're dealing with here. This is why the courts in all the states have been really, really, they really favor women in a pretty significant way. I know they do here in Texas. Somebody said Arizona was a bit different, but that's how this thing works. Anyway, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Paxton. Again, if I was a Christian, or if I had a Christian community, because I would throw as much money behind this father, whatever it takes to get this thing to the Supreme Court. I mean, that's just it. But the problem is that his son will be in transition mode. But I think it would be important from a social perspective, so it doesn't happen to other kids. This is terrible, absolutely terrible, to have a group of 11 strangers determine how your child's going to be raised. Now, what happened here was that the jury ruled that the mother would get sole custody of the child. That's what the jury ruled. You get sole custody of the child. Now, let's say the mother was just a regular mom. Okay, well, I guess that wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing. Didn't rule sole custody for the other kid though, his brother. So there's a hole in their judgment in a lot of ways. But when they allow the mother to then begin to transition the kid, they're basically giving the mother permission. And that's how it went down yesterday. But 11 people decided that the mother knew best, and that the mother was going to be the best person to be able to determine the wellness and the health of that child's future. They're solely misinformed. I want to talk a little bit about Trump today. Oh, by the way, this is really interesting. We're in this dualistic society, this dualistic universe, and what's really, really interesting is let's see this thing here. This is interesting. So this woman, Kim Cooks, this will be here. I got to show you this one. This is the lawyer, or the judge rather. Here she is, the God-sized dreamer. There she is. This woman is really in love with herself, by the way. There are a bunch of pictures of her bodybuilding. She's really into her body, really into weights. Anyway, after a dispute with bailiffs over courtroom security, Dallas County Family Court Judge Kim Cooks apparently took matters into her own hands by bringing a gun with her on the bench during a recent child custody jury trial, according to the Dallas County Sheriff's Department. A report obtained by Texas lawyer. This is a website. So continued Lexus Advance. I don't have this. So there's more to the story, but this is a woman who obviously is not immune to taking law into her own hands. Of course, we've seen this. We've seen this. The other really interesting thing is that we had a judge in Texas most recently wasn't censored, but there was a lawsuit brought against this judge for bringing Amber Geiger a Bible. And again, it's in Dallas, so it's not really far from where the younger Georgioulis case was happening. They're very different. So she brings this woman her Bible. And she gets a lawsuit or a suit filed against her by these atheists that go after all the statuary and all the religious kind of iconography and symbolism. She gets a lawsuit. And what's going to happen to this woman? Zero, nothing, nada. Interesting, isn't it? That Dallas seems to be this kind of place of really deep duality. You just look in the center, right, of the name. You get the two L's, like the Twin Towers, and you have the A on both sides, the alpha. So anyway, both in Dallas, and another kind of version of this duality trip, which brings us into Trump. And I wanted to talk about Trump today because Trump has gone on record and he said, we're going to leave northern Syria. Trump is really funny though, because he will tell you the truth. If you really listen, if you're really listening to him, he will tell you the truth. And he said, yeah, well, we're going to leave some people behind because there's an oil well there, or there's an oil facility there, and we're going to protect it. Of course they're going to protect it. They're going to protect it because that oil belongs to Israel, more than likely. It's probably got a contract with Genie Oil, which is why the whole thing started in the first place. To go in, destabilize Syria, to get somebody else in there besides Assad, whom I haven't seen in a long time. I don't know what's going on with the guy. Is he still around? I don't even know. But the whole goal there was to get in somebody else, regime change it, and get that oil, which is in the northern part of Syria. And guess what? Mission accomplished. They got the oil. And they're moving the people out except for that particular series of wells and extraction, which I'm sure is connected to Genie Petroleum, which is connected to Israel. They own and run Genie Petroleum. Genie Energy, I think it's called, right? So where do the troops go? Well, they haven't come home yet. They're in Iraq now. They've gone into Iraq, and Iraq does not want them. Iraq does not want the troops. So Iraq is petitioning the UN. They're like, get these people out of here. They've caused enough damage already. We don't need more. I mean, we went into Iraq and we obliterated that country, destroyed it. If you went into Baghdad, you'd still see rubble all over Baghdad. And Baghdad was once one of the thriving cities of the Middle East. And Saddam Hussein was a Ba'athist. And the Baathists were about as close to being a communist or socialist in the Middle East as you could find. And if you looked at Saddam Hussein's record with women, he employed women. Women had, they had rights in Iraq, unlike places like Saudi Arabia, where women have zero rights. Iraq championed their rights. Saddam Hussein was somebody who was like, hey, whoever the best person is. Was he a tyrant? Sure. If you're on top and you get the spoils, you got to defend those spoils. That's part of the deal. Once you get to the top, people are coming after you. It's part of human history. You can see it all the time. If your product is on top, you got people coming after you. They want to take you down. They want to be the number one product. If you're a sports team, they want to take you down. They want to be the number one team. It's just the way it is. You get to the top, you got to defend your spoils. And sometimes you defend the spoils, especially if they're involved with people. You have to protect the people. And, that's what he was doing, for better or worse. And we went in and he blew it up. We blew it up. We blew the whole thing up and turned it into just like a graveyard. And now we're back. Do we really want to be back? Do they want us back? That's the other question here. So they're trying to figure out who they can talk to. Get these guys out of here. We don't want them here anymore. They want to have their country back. Well, good luck on that, especially in the southern part. Iraq will never get the southern part of their country back, because that's really where all the oil wells are. That's done. There's going to be permanent occupation there, unless somehow they can buddy up to the Russians or buddy up to the Chinese, but that's probably not going to happen. So the one thing that Trump has done, though, theoretically, and I really, 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 really hope that he brings these troops home, and Iraq is just a temporary place, so they can actually be out of that theater in the Middle East, is that he's removing us from this war effort, which is something that Kennedy was going to do. This gets us back to the Kennedy timeline and how there are certain pieces with Trump that connect us back to that Kennedy timeline. And I talked about this at Solutions after I turned the video off, which you guys didn't see. But, for people who watch the show and have been following this for a while, I talk about the Kennedy timeline and how things were moving in a certain direction. And when Kennedy was assassinated, and yes, he was assassinated. He was not removed and living in some deep underground bunker in Mexico. And he is not Jimmy Carter. He's not Jimmy Carter. But he's gone. And even if let's just say in the far reaches of imagination that he really wasn't taken out, he's still gone. And there was still a coup, and all these things happened. So we have this coup that takes place with Kennedy. The intelligence agency, CIA, I think the NSA was very nascent at that point, but it was the CIA, and there are groups that we don't even know about. There are groups in the CIA, and there are other groups that we're not aware of. They went in and they basically said, we're going to start to run everything. And it was the communist takeover of the United States of America. Lyndon Baines Johnson was a dyed-in-the-wool socialist Marxist. We had the New Deal, not the New Deal, but we had the Great Society and the War on Poverty and all that stuff that takes place very, very quickly, right on the heels of Kennedy's assassination. And it's really the explosion of the welfare state. And then right after that, we have the civil rights movement and all these things in a big way. I mean, it was happening during Kennedy. Obviously, it wasn't like Kennedy dies and all this stuff. There was a ramp up. Kennedy had to send the troops, National Guard, into Alabama to deal with George Wallace and all that stuff, right? University of Alabama. Anyway, but that's what happens. And so in that period, in that 1963 period, we began to experience the communist takeover of the United States of America. It happens. And then we're entrenched in Vietnam, and this terrible war that goes on in Vietnam, on and on and on, demoralizing, 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 splitting the culture, splitting the generation, splitting sexes, right? It happens. America's inner cities become ghettos and graveyards, thanks to a lot of African-American, so-called Black American males being conscripted, going into the war, getting blown out. And those that do return are shell-shocked, traumatized, and ready to make a living in the cities vis-a-vis the drugs that started to come in through the Far East during that time. And the explosion of heroin coming into the country, because at that time there was a handoff and a pass-off with the Golden Triangle, which at that time had been essentially run by the French, because the French were in Vietnam and they were getting opium from Vietnam. It was one of those places where they were getting opium. Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, they were all opium producing countries. So the French were running that, and then guess what happens? The United States comes in, and then the opium trade is then taken over because the French are gone. So this is what happens, and we become this incredibly destabilized country, and we move more towards social Marxism. And we have the legislation that promoted it. And once the legislation was in place, oh, guess who starts showing up? Bill Ayers, Bernadine Dorn, the Weather Underground. We have this wave of first wave, I guess second wave, communist Bolshevik revolutionaries that are now there to take advantage of the new legislation. This is what happens. So it was the communist takeover of the United States. It occurred. This is why we are where we are today. And Barack Obama was the anointed king, or he was the anointed president that would be the apotheosis. He would represent the crowning achievement of that goal. They got to the top. What happens when you get to the top? You have to defend it. You have to defend your position. And this is where Trump is coming into play. Now, Trump is got that Sun Uranus conjunction in Gemini, and so he's going to do things that are interesting, and they're going to look good, and they're going to sound good, and they're going to, ping with his base. And then on the other hand, he's also keeping troops there because he wants that oil facility intact so his buddies in Israel can get the oil. This is how Trump operates. This is how he's going to get us out of the Paris Accord. But I guarantee you he'll do something else in order to kind of further some other part of it's just who he is. As he gets us out of the Paris Accord, and all the people who are really on the ball, apparently there are more icebergs now forming in Greenland than ever before. So they're not really melting. But then Trump will flip a switch and say, well, let's move forward with 5G. You get this with Trump. This is what happens. And we've seen it again and again and again. Troops are out, sounds good. Yeah, but we're staying here so we can keep the oil wells intact. I get it, right? The world is a business. It's a business. And people need to wake up and understand that. And this is something that is becoming very transparent. Trump is the most transparent president we've ever seen. You just have to look. You have to keep your eyes open and look. Both the good and the bad are being revealed, right? But what he's doing now is he's theoretically getting us back to that pre-Kennedy timeline. Because what was Kennedy going to do? He was going to bring the troops home. And this is now Trump's mandate. We're going to bring the troops home. Now, it remains to be seen, and we hope that actually occurs for the troops and to get us back to that timeline. And I've talked about this again and again and again. It works with Gemini. Gemini is a carrier wave, is a signal. You look at all the Gemini associations, all the Gemini connections all along the way, and you can see this, right? These two timelines, these two tracks of time that we're running on. And the whole idea with Trump, theoretically, is to go like this and to bring it together sort of pre-Kennedy, PK. There's a PK and an AK. And Kennedy is almost like this Christ-like figure, even though he wasn't. He was not a great guy. He was really not a great guy. He started to wake up a little bit because he started taking acid, much to his credit. but he was not a great guy. He was into power. He was really into power, but he was smart, and he was trying to ultimately, I think, through this evolutionary process, through psychedelics, restore the balance. And he started to get too close. And then his lover, what's her name? Mary Meyer Pinchot, Cord Meyer's wife, who was the head of the CIA. She got snuffed. Anyway, this is where we are. Theoretically, this is what's going on with Trump. And the removal of the troops, it begins to echo the removal of the troops from Vietnam, which Kennedy wanted to do but didn't do. Now, the other side of that, the flip side of that, you need to pay attention to this from the money side, is that Kennedy wanted to go to the silver standard. And he was working with the Hunt brothers and John Connally, which is why he was in Texas, by the way. And John Connally was in that vehicle. So he was working with the Hunt brothers and John Connally. And the story is that the Hunt brothers were trying to corner the silver market because Kennedy wanted to return the United States to a silver standard. And what he did is it was really interesting because we had silver coins before Kennedy. And it's during Kennedy's watch where all of a sudden they started to insert a little ring of copper, which devalued the silver. So theoretically, that was done so that silver would actually be worth more. At that time, a silver dollar was a silver dollar. It was a dollar. That's all it was a dollar. You know, it wasn't $2. It wasn't $2.50. It was a dollar. So theoretically, Kennedy said, okay, well, we're going to devalue silver as a form of exchange, which means that the value of it will go up. And if the value of it goes up and we get enough of it, then we could use that as the form of a new currency and then circumnavigate the Fed. And that was part of this plan. And Texas was a very important state, not just because Lyndon Johnson was from just down the road here. He used to come and drink in Fredericksburg. Anyway, because Texas has a renewable treaty with the United States every year. So the idea was that Texas would then become the banking center with the Hunt brothers cornering the silver market and then moving towards the silver certificates. And that we could use all the assets that were related to silver to create a new currency, because we all know that there's no gold in Fort Knox. Those are lead bars with gold plating. That's all they are. Anyway, and that was the plan. So what is Trump trying to do now? He's trying to get back to the gold standard. And if you look at his chart, if you look at his penthouse, gold is a theme. His penthouse in Trump Tower is a shrine to Apollo. And the sun and gold and Leo and Apollo, they all play a role in Trump's life. So the gold standard is part of the Trump, how do I say this? The Trump matrix in a lot of ways. So just like how Kennedy wanted to get us to the silver standard and get out of the way of the Fed, Trump wants to do the same thing with gold. Now, I'm not sure at this point in time if that's the best thing to do. Because if you look at who's been buying all the gold, it's been China and India. And they've been watching this and they know that this is on the horizon. And once gold comes in, right there, the lending rates, being able to borrow cheap money, those days are going to be over. So what gold does is it locks in the position of where people are. And if you have money and assets and we go to a gold standard, there's a very good chance you're going to be able to hold on to those while people below you will not be able to move up as quickly. And maybe that's where the cryptos come into play. I'm not an expert on the crypto scene. But anyway, this is where Trump, again, is echoing and mirroring the Kennedy effect or the Kennedy timeline. And even with Kennedy brought his brother in, and which is pretty nepotistic in a lot of ways. But Trump did the same thing with his own family. He brought in his son-in-law and his daughter, and they're playing a role. And I'm sure even his own way, Donald Trump Jr. is kind of out doing political stuff. And he did. And run up to the election, it wasn't all that good. But Trump does not have a brother like Kennedy. However, Kennedy did lose a brother, and so did Trump. Isn't that interesting? The mirroring of the two Geminis with Kennedy and Trump is really fascinating. And I think that's kind of where this is headed, ultimately, hopefully. And also, if you look at what happened with that, when Kennedy was assassinated, that's when the deep state took over. That's when the intelligence agencies began to run things, began to work with other intelligence agencies around the world, like MI6 and MI6 connected to Tavistock, and the Mossad really began to ramp up their activity. And the Mossad really comes online in the late 60s, early 70s. So the intelligence agencies began their coup. The deep state took over. And what has Trump theoretically been after? He's been after the deep state and these intelligence agencies, which again gets us back to this pre-Kennedy state, pre-Camelot. That's where we are, in my estimation. And now what's interesting is that the Republicans are starting to fight back. Finally. They're finally starting to, and I don't care about the Republican-Democrat thing per se, but Trump has been out on an island. And now the Republicans are saying, you know what, maybe we should chime in, because they're smelling blood. That's why they're getting involved. It's not because I think that they have any dog in the fight with Trump, but they're smelling blood. And I know that at a certain level, the parties are all the same. I get that. But human nature, in a lot of ways, is predicated upon dominance and acquiring and hoarding, and like the person who wins the battle and the spoils are then part of their victory, and they have to defend it furiously from the people that want to take them. Right? There's blood in the water, and the sharks are smelling it. And I think that's what's happening now. And what the Democrats are doing with their impeachment trial, this is right out of Stalinist Russia. It's right out of Stalinist Russia. It's ridiculous. It's totally ridiculous. And they're running star chambers, essentially. Anyway, that's happening now. We're seeing it all take place. The exposition, the transparency, it's all happening. It's all happening now. It's really, just sit back every day. There's something and you just look, all these different fields, media, realms of interaction. The truth is just snap, crackling, and popping. In sports, watching LeBron James, and he got his ass kicked the other night. 2 nights ago, his ass kicked. It was Tuesday night, season opener in Los Angeles. The Lakers got their ass kicked. And LeBron James, of course, has been Trump. There's some really funny LeBron James memes with China. I think I grabbed some. Let me just show you. There are some that are really hilarious. Let me show you some funny memes, and I'll get out of here. Some of these memes are so clever. You guys will laugh. They're so freaking clever. The age of the meme is upon us. You got to see some of these. There's some that just crack my ass up. Oh my God. All right. You got to see this. This is a good kind of schadenfreude. Let's see, it's funny as hell. This is just one. There's some that are totally insane. Here, isn't that funny shit? That totally cracks me up. And there's more. Let me see if I can grab some more of these. Oh my God. People are merciless, man. They are just merciless. Look at them. That's funny, man. That's some funny stuff. All right, there's one that's really. All right, this is my really bad sense of humor. I've got a very dark sense of humor, but I got to show you this one too. This has the other one, but it has another meme. You guys are gonna crack up. See this? I was looking at these last night, and I was getting some really well-deserved belly laughs. Check this out. Look at this. This is funny. I can't help myself. I find this to be freaking hilarious. You see, this is the truth, man. This is where it's coming out. And it's look at this. And it just happened like in a week. Oh, it's insanely funny. And you know LeBron James is taking hits. He's the king. You don't mess with the king like that. You don't. He's been given everything in this life. There's another one. Oh my God! Even his own fans, even the fanboys are turning on him. Here we go, Chairman Uncle Tom. I mean, look at this stuff. It's incredible. It's incredible, and it is. And believe me, I've looked at who's creating some of these memes, and who they're not strictly created by so-called racist, LeBron-hating whiteys. No, this is across the board, man. He is getting just scalded. Isn't that hilarious? That is so fucking funny. I think my favorite is the one with the China bear, though. And there's a bunch more. What else is there? There was one that was really great. Anyway, you get it. You get the drift, right? You get the drift. You get the gist. And by the way, oh yeah. These people are brilliant. They're totally brilliant with how they do this. Here's another one. I could do this all day, but I won't. It's that same. Look at that. I'm sorry. This is really funny. It's really funny. We need to laugh every now and then. He's a Capricorn, South Node in Capricorn. Sorry, dude. That's what happens. This is what happens when the South Node is in your sign. All right, let me check in with you guys. I've been ranting and raving here for about an hour now. Let's see what we got. Started streaming. Let's see, check out Illuminate Trilogy. Yes, Illuminati Trilogy. Rabbit Allen Wilson, Winnie the Pooh. Let's see. America caved to the commies immediately following World War II. Yep. Hopefully there'll be some positive outcome. What else we have? It's unfamiliar to parents who experience children with balanced energy. So unfamiliar that they need to be changed. Wow, good point, Bonnie. Yep. Let's see what else we have here, but off topic. China. You mentioned China, so my mind went there. Powerful pillar and carding to illustrate healed, balanced femininity, masculinity. Yes. The whole transgender thing is to break the power early. I agree, Bonnie. I totally agree. Robert's is singing my song here. He has a portrait of Andrew Jackson in his office. That's true, Luann, he does. You see Bannon is making a movie about Weiwei. I did not see that, but Steve Bannon, he's a movie maker. Bonnie says, Bonnie, of course, joined Steve and I and Chris on our show about a month and a half ago. And she wrote, the transgender surgery breaks the power of the balanced souls who incarnate in order to finally demonstrate powerful sense of balance women and men. I totally agree. Yep. After all, the chief business of the American people is business. They're profoundly concerned with producing, buying, selling, investing, and prospering in the world. Kennedy family's cabal in a turf war with the Bushes. They're all gangs. They're all gangs. That's what they are. Kennedy was having a change of consciousness. Hey, Sticky, what's going on? Nice to see you. Nice to see you. Let's see what else we have here. Anybody else? That makes sense with classical electric trauma pivot point. Fine, well, exactly. Let's see. Yeah, that's interesting. So Ian brings up a point about the body of Saddam Hussein. It was not him. It wasn't him. It was not Saddam Hussein. It was not. It wasn't him. It wasn't him at all. That guy that they pulled out of that spider's nest or whatever, he wasn't Saddam Hussein. I don't know where Saddam Hussein is. Relocated, tortured, I don't know. Is he having drinks with tiny umbrellas in them with Ken Lay? Maybe, I don't know, but that was not him. And that was clearly not Osama bin Laden that was wiped out by Obama. That was bullshit. That was such a bad moment. What a ridiculous, fraudulent moment. Obama killed Osama bin Laden. You know, you would think that people would talk about that, and that would be sort of this immortal moment in American history. People don't talk about that. You know why? Because it didn't happen. That's why. It did not happen. That was not him. If it was him, then would have a resonance, right? Some people believe that Obama was actually Osama bin Laden. Wrap your head around that one. Some people. I'm not saying that he was. I'm just saying that some people did. It is food for thought. In any case, that wasn't him. And even after the initial Osama bin Laden communiques, they'd have this guy showing up on, you know, some ratty ass pixelated video. It's like, who is this guy? That's not Osama bin Laden. This is a fake, total fake. All right, I'm out of here for now, for today. I will be back tomorrow. Guess we have a really shitty football game lined up tonight. Anyway, I'll be back tomorrow, Friday Farcast. I'm not sure where I'm going to go with it, but we'll be back tomorrow. And basically, we're on schedule again. It's either next Tuesday or Wednesday. I think it might be Tuesday. I'm going to be on Patriot Radio. So it's a station here in Kerrville. And I'm going to be on that show with Jeanette Hormuth, and we're going to be talking about fluoride with Matt Long. And Matt is the head of the Tea Party here in the Hill Country. And Matt's an interesting character. He's a really good orator. He's really dialed in to Texas and less government. Now, he's also he doesn't have the same kind of fire that we have around fluoride, or that we have, or I would have around things like vaccination. So he's not quite in that sort of fold with us, but he is in the informed consent world. So we're going to be on a show on next week, and I'm going to ask him if I can stream that part of the show on my show with him. I don't think it should be a problem. It's only part of the show, but I'm gonna ask him ahead of time. So if I do that, the 15 minutes of flame will be simulcast through Matt's show, which would be kind of interesting. So and it may get Matt some more people, some more listeners, which I'll certainly bring up to him. But it's also a way to kind of cross-pollinate mainstream media with more decidedly alternative media, which is what this is. Okay, long show today, but a lot to cover, a lot to talk about. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to stay open to what's possible. Whoops. And from myself and Jasper here in Hill Country, have yourself a wonderful day.